Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Mercury. Mercury is an assassin who is seen only in the jungle role, and focuses on being a late game hyper carry who simply cannot lose a one-on-one once he reaches his full build. There are some exceptions of course, but in most situations he will end up being the strongest character in the game if he's able to achieve his full build. Build-wise, Mercury has a very clear-cut build. He needs Golden Blade to clear the jungle effectively, not to mention he loves attack speed and movement speed. Then finally you want crit and some penetration, and some lifesteal on top of that if you can fit it into your build. You really can't build Mercury any other way. He needs crit, and this is why he pops in and out of the meta so much. He really is that reliant on crit being a good option for he himself to be a good option. Nowadays, with some tank items like Archmages and Frostbounds being crazy good, Merc can actually be built tanky, but I'd only recommend going that if you have no self-respect. I think it's great. Relics wise, you absolutely need beads on him. As a basic attack based character, you won't be able to function without beads. Then you typically either want Aegis or Blink. Aegis is better for when you're just starting out on Merc, although, like Arachne before him, blinking in and just hitting people is sometimes a far better option than relying on your movement abilities to get yourself in. Shard wise, it's just Wing Shard on Mercury, as you'd expect since he's a basic attack based character. Let's get into a simple but really cool passive. Well, actually, Mercury has 2 passives. First off, any bonus movement speed granted to Mercury from something like a speed buff, or your own or a teammate's ability, your own or a teammate's relic like sprint, or movement speed from items, Mercury will gain a portion of that extra movement speed and convert it to power. But don't worry, you can see how much power is granted on the passive meter. Needless to say, Mercury loves movement speed, but you don't want to build just 6 movement speed items and call it a day. You want to get crafty and try to give yourself movement speed whenever you can, but not hinder your overall damage just for a bit more movement speed. Things like always prioritizing your speed buff, grabbing an item with the same power as another but that includes movement speed on it, and utilizing cheeky things like the little movement speed AoEs the chest minions in the jungle give you. This movement speed also works with the second part of Mercury's passive. As Mercury walks along the ground, he will gain bonus power towards his next successful basic attack, and a lot of it, up to 20% bonus. This leads into crit being so good for him, since a 20% bonus now becomes a 30% bonus with crit applied. With that said though, you have to be careful not to waste this passive basic attack. I mean, you have to in order to do things like clear the jungle, but it's another Arachne situation where you have to be very careful not to let your first basic attack during a gank land on a tank or minion. This doesn't kill Mercury's gank potential, but it does hinder his damage by literally 20% on that first basic attack. Also, you won't gain any passive meter if you jump while moving around, so if you're a jump spammer, you might want to get out of the habit of that on Mercury. That said though, he has 2 dashes which will still grant his passive meter, and one of them can give them the entire passive meter from nothing in one go. More on that later, but for now his first ability. After a short delay, Mercury does damage to all enemies in an AoE, this ability being able to be used over walls. The size of this AoE changes depending on the rank of the ability, and the ability is also able to crit, and will work with crit related effects like Demon Blade's attack speed bonus and Deathbringer's bonus damage. A pretty sweet ability, but that delay is going to be your worst enemy when you first start playing Mercury. It's genuinely hard to hit in the early levels as that AoE is a tiny little thing, but the damage, even if it doesn't crit, is very respectable, and with a 9-second cooldown, it's great for both when you start ganks and finish them off too. That delay though means that you can't basic attack for a significant amount of time. A significant amount of time in Smite anyways. This means that while clearing jungle camps especially, you want to use it as maximum range as possible to not delay your basic attacks from coming out. And even then, this ability is a pretty poor jungle clear. And spoiler alert, Merc has nothing else to clear the jungle with really, which is why he's so reliant on Golden Blade and has been for his entire lifetime in Smite, so that he can more easily clear the jungle. Later on in the game, this is worsened. The time the ability takes to come out is easily enough for 2 or 3 basic attacks, which is far more damage than this ability. So use this ability the instant your opponent is able to leave your melee range, but never use this ability in melee range over your basic attacks. Using it for damage when your intended target is out of melee range is really all there is to say about this ability, largely due to the potency of Mercury's second ability. This ability has a passive and an active effect. Passively, Mercury will gain permanent movement speed by leveling this ability, which of course will count towards his passive power, which he really appreciates as a melee basic attacker. Even better though, once this ability is activated, Mercury becomes immune to slows and gains a massive attack speed stem for 5 seconds. And just to be clear, the movement speed and the activation of this ability are not tied together whatsoever. You always get that bonus movement speed so long as you have a level into this ability. So once you're in melee range to basic attack someone, basic to basic attacks and watch them fall to pieces. Not much to talk about here, this is your absolute best way to kill targets, and your game plan revolves completely around trying to get into melee range on your intended target in order to pop this ability and start destroying people. And again, that basic attack cancel is very important so that you get 2 full power basic attacks back to back, and it also delays that weird slow third hit on his basic attack chain, so that's good too, although on some targets they die before that even comes out. There are arguments to be made that you may want to hold on to this ability and not just use it immediately once you get an opening on your intended target, to play around things like Aegis and Shell more effectively, but for the most part it's best just to use this ability no matter what to give you the option of the slow immunity on top of the fact that those options like Aegis and Shell may not even come up. and if you don't start hitting your flurry of basic attacks in time, you might miss your opportunity entirely. Speaking of that slow immunity, it's obviously not what this ability is all about, but never forget about it either. Assess the slows on the enemy team, and if you're on the escape, save your second ability for any and all slows, because it will make a difference. You may wonder, how are you supposed to get ganks and dives started? With your third ability, of course. Mercury dashes forward, is not immune for the duration of the dash, and as I mentioned earlier, the dash does count towards Mercury's passive punch. Mercury deals flat damage to minions and can dash straight through them, although if he hits an enemy god, he will stay in place and stun them, then throw them in the direction he's currently looking once the stun ends, dealing damage over time as he stuns them. A few things to break down here. For one, if he's already stunned an enemy god, he will still deal the damage over time and throw them if he himself gets hard CC'd, although the hard CC will stop him from moving his camera and deciding which direction to throw them. So in short, flick your camera in the direction you want to throw them as soon as possible. On that note, diminishing returns is a factor here too. DR can make that stun insanely quick, and will not affect the damage or throw distance, but will in turn give you less time to aim your throw. That's a blessing in disguise though, as Mercury standing still while he casts the ability is another thorn in his side. You've got to be very careful about dashing onto your intended target with the enemy team nearby, because just sitting there is basically asking them to peel you off your target. I mean, think about it. You dash on the enemy ADC and then say they have a Bellona in the solo lane, all she needs to do is 3 you at long range, which is a disarm, and you're done. You can't kill the enemy ADC now unless you yourself beads. And if you did all that, too close to the enemy support, they will no doubt hard CC you as soon as you connect to your target. And essentially now, you have a situation where you're hard CC'd and you threw your target away from yourself. Luckily though, Mercury can use his beads while the ability is going off, allowing a Mercury player with good reaction times to still get the entire ability off, even if the enemy team jumps on him. Speaking of the throw, you typically want to throw your intended target to the nearest wall. It's obviously best to throw them directly into a wall so you can pummel them, rather than throw them away from yourself, outside of melee range. Naturally though, if you've got your teammates nearby, especially while ganking during the laning phase, just throw the enemy into your teammates instead. Mercury can't really pummel people until he gets later into his builds anyways, so you want to use this ability to set up for your teammates early on, and later depending on the situation, only using it selfishly when there's zero chance of your teammates picking up the enemy. When you have no choice other than to throw the enemy away from you, don't forget about the old adage of using your 1 as soon as the target is out of melee range. So throw them, 1, then walk back up for some basic attacks. Surely though, they'll just use their relics and use their movement ability to get away from you, right? Well, this is where Mercury's ultimate comes in to cover both of these options. Upon activation, Mercury begins charging his ultimate, and he can cancel this charge at any time. Upon reactivation, Mercury becomes CC immune and quickly traverses the entirety of the ultimate charge. However, the ultimate will be blocked by any and all structures, both map walls and player-made walls will stop the ultimate, and plus, Mercury is actually able to be hit and targeted as he traverses the ultimate. Although of course player-made structures and persisting CC on the ground to stop Mercury needs to be done with very quick reactions from Mercury's opponents. And they need to have the right tools to do it too, like a mirror wall or a Nox 2 to stop the ultimate, so for the most part, your main worry should be map walls. So while using it for an escape, don't forget that you're only CC immune on that startup, and getting CC'd will stop the charge, so try to get some distance before you try and use it so you can get a nice and long charge. If the ability hits an enemy, they take damage and will be spun around quickly in a sort of stun effect, although at the end of this CC they will be facing the opposite direction of where they were looking when they were hit with the ultimate. So here you go, now you have a tool to engage an enemy backline in a fight, to counter gank from exceptionally long distances, and if you start a gank with your core kit, you'll have a way to catch back up to your targets after they use their movement abilities. Really the difficulty with this ability is obvious, timing it so that you charge it just enough to hit your target and remain close to them, even after the short delay between firing the ability and reaching your destination. And to be frank, there's no real teaching it. It's something you're really going to have to play a bunch of matches with Mercury on to get the timing down. Because that window of opportunity to ult someone doesn't last forever thanks to relics and purification beads, enemy movement abilities coming back off cooldown, and the biggest counter to Mercury ultimate, people hearing you charge the ultimate and hide behind walls. All I can really say for this ultimate is be proactive with it. In the early and mid game, it's pretty simple. Just either initiate with your core kit or your ultimate, then use your dash or ultimate to finish off the kill depending on which one's left. But when it comes to the late game, you really need a good ultimate to get effective and be in there. Sometimes you may just need to get a single target out of it, but other times when your teammates are lacking in CC, it'll be up to you to get a multi-target ultimate, which is mostly just there for disruption rather than singling out a target. It'll take a lot of experience with it to not only hit it consistently, but time it well too. Mercury is definitely more of a hands-on learning god, no pun intended. But regardless, when it comes to late game fights, you should always, and I mean always, be looking for a good opportunity to use your ultimate. Let's get back to what I can actually teach you and get some combos. 1 on approach, 3, 2, basic attacks. Against gods with no movement ability, 3, 1, walk up, 2, basic attacks. For late game picks, or against gods with no movement in CC, blink, basic, 2, basic, then if they CC you, 1 them, once you use their movement ability, 3 after them. 3, 1, 2, basic attacks, then chase with ultimate. Blink, basic 2 basic, chase with ultimate, and only use your 3 and 1 if you need to. Ultimate, basic 2 basics, then the same idea here, use your 1 and 3 only as needed, focusing on basic attacking. For ability leveling, you want your 1 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 2 at level 3. From there you max your 1, your 2, then your 3. Putting a level into your ultimate at level 5, but skipping leveling until your 1 and 2 are maxed. And there are some players as well that just get the 1 to rank 3 and then start leveling the 2. It really is that important to him. Mercury is obviously very simple. You want to get in there and punch people, like, a lot. And he's got the tools to get it done. But it takes a lot of decisiveness to know when it's safe to use these tools. His ultimate, which is hard to hit and can be seen from miles away, and his only real damaging ability takes a while to come out. I think on the whole, Mercury is difficult, but he's very satisfying when he pops off late game. Plus, I think he teaches you a lot of SMITE fundamentals since his end goal is very simple, i.e. punching people. But getting it done consistently is the tricky part, and will help you learn how a lot of assassins want to operate. So not only is he fun with great pop-off potential, but it'll teach you a lot about jungling while you do it. That's all I have on Mercury for now. Thanks for watching.